The new alien student arrived on a Tuesday, which was by most accounts the most boring day of the week. Her name was Riva. She came from the Sorith Dominion, a civilization so old it had libraries older than Earth's oceans. She was tall, blue-skinned, and carried herself the way someone carries a trophy, like she already knew she had one. The Galactic Council had placed her in Millfield Secondary School as part of the new exchange observation program. The idea was simple. Let the aliens watch humans up close. Learn about them. Understand them. Riva had read the full briefing on humans in 40 minutes. She did not think she needed more time than that. The classroom was loud when she walked in. Students twisted in their seats to stare. Some whispered. Some took photos. Mr. Okafor, the science teacher, clapped his hands twice and told everyone to settle down, which nobody did. Riva stood at the front and looked at the room the way someone looks at a meal they did not order. She activated the small bio reader on her wrist and swept it slowly across the class. It hummed quietly, reading heat signatures, neural output, physical markers. Most students registered as ordinary. A few showed slightly elevated stress responses, probably from excitement. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that the Dominion's records had not already predicted. She reached the back row last. There was a girl sitting there who had not turned around when Riva walked in. She was still looking out the window. Her clothes were clean, but worn. Her hair was pulled back simply. Her notebook was open on the desk, covered in small, dense writing. She had not looked up once. Riva pointed her bioreader at the girl. The device hummed. Then it gave a flat reading. 0 stress. 0 elevated response. Biologically average in every measurable way. Riva moved on .mr. Okafor assigned Riva to the empty seat 2 rows from the back. She sat down, folded her hands on the desk, and prepared to observe. The lesson that day was about humanity's place in the galactic community. Mr. Okafor had written 3 questions on the board and asked students to answer them out loud. It was clearly meant to impress the alien visitor. Most students sat straighter than usual. The 3rd question was, what does humanity offer that no other species can? Hands went up. Cass, a girl near the front with a loud voice and a louder personality, said, our creativity. Fun, who always sat next to Cass, said, our history. A few others gave answers about technology and emotion. Then the quiet girl in the back row raised her hand. It was a small gesture, barely above her shoulder to Mr. Okafor nodded at her. Da-da. Dara lowered her hand and said, simply, patience, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to keep working. There was a pause. Then Cass turned around in her seat and laughed. It was not a kind laugh. Patience, Cass said. That's your big answer? That's not even a skill. That's just what boring people call doing nothing. Fun grinned. A few other students smiled. Someone muttered something that Dara probably heard at Mr. Okafor said, all right, that's enough, in the tone of someone who had no intention of making it enough. Dara said nothing. She looked back out the window. Her face did not change. Her pen moved back to her notebook, and she continued writing, as if the room had simply moved on, and so had she. Riva watched all of this. She noted it in her observation log. Subject D. Wells. Socially low-ranked. Passive response to peer dismissal. No defensive behavior. No emotion en los que lastan. She tagged it under the folder labeled unremarkable. After class, Riva walked the main corridor with a small group of students who were eager to be near her. She answered their questions about the Dominion with careful, measured politeness. She was good at performing interest when it was useful. At the far end of the corridor, she saw Dara walking alone toward the side exit. Nobody walked with her. Nobody called after her. She just went, quietly, the way water finds its way downhill without anyone telling it to. Riva watched her go. That evening, back in the house the council had arranged for her stay, Riva wrote her first full report. She described the school, the students, the general social dynamics. She rated human emotional output as high but unfocused. She rated intellectual potential as moderate. She noted the exchange program was unlikely to produce any data the Dominion did not already at the very bottom of her report. In the section marked Notes of Low Priority, she wrote, 1 subject D. Wells, female, age approximately 17. No notable readings. No social standing. Non-participant in group dynamics. No follow-up required. She sent the report. Across a distance that would take light itself a long time to cross. The report arrived at Vel Prime, the great station city of the Galactic Council. A junior analyst named Yael logged it into the system at the end of a long shift without reading it closely. The archivist, the Council's ancient automated intelligence, processed the report the way it processed all reports, quietly, in the background, cross-referencing every name and detail against 40,000 years of records. When it reached the line about D. Wells, it stopped. Not for long. Just long enough for one small alert to blink on in a corner of a screen that nobody was watching. The alert said, Match found. Category, Null Class. Record age, 11,000 years. Nobody saw it. Dura, meanwhile, had taken a different route home. Not through the main streets. Through the back of the industrial district, past the chain-link fence, through the side door of an old building that looked like it had been empty for years. The door closed behind her. Inside, something hummed. The alert blinked for 6 hours before Yael noticed it. She was on her second cup of something warm and her fourth hour of a shift that was supposed to end 3 hours ago when the small light in the corner of her screen caught her eye. She almost dismissed it. Late shift flags were usually errors, misread data, old system glitches, the archivist confusing similar biosignatures across species. It happened more than the Council liked to admit, but Yael was the kind of person who clicked the thing instead of closing it. The flag was linked to Riva's report from Earth, specifically to one line in the low-priority notes section. Yael pulled up the full record the archivist had matched it against. The file was old. Not just old in the way a grandfather's coat is old. Old in a way that made Yael sit up straight and put her cup down. The record was 11,000 years old. It was listed under a category called Null Class Entities. The description was short. Beings whose power output reads as 0 on all known instruments. Not because they have no power, because the frequency on which they operate is outside the range of any scanner ever built. They do not appear on readings. They appear only in their effects. Yael stared at the screen for a long time. She pulled the rest of the Null Class file. There were only 9 entries in 11,000 years. Each one described something vast, something that had existed before the current shape of the galaxy. One had stopped a chain reaction that would have collapsed 40-star systems. One had kept a dimensional boundary stable for 300 years through what the old record described as sustained personal attention. One had chosen, the record said quietly, to become small, to rest. The greatest powers, the ancient entry read, sometimes step down not from defeat, but from exhaustion, from the weight of always being needed. Yael printed nothing. She did not trust this to a printer yet. She went instead to the archivist's direct interface terminal and typed her question carefully. What does it mean that the biomatch returned on a current subject? The archivist's response came after a pause that was unusual for a system that normally answered instantly. It means the subject is present, awake, possibly unaware of what they are, or possibly very aware and simply choosing to be quiet about it. Yael forwarded the flag to Counselor Bren with a short note asking him to review it. Then she sent a different message to Riva on Earth. She kept it brief. She marked it urgent. Do not let the subject D. Wells out of your sight. Do not make her feel watched. Do not crowd her. Do not do anything that makes her feel unsafe. I will explain when I can. Please just trust this. Riva read the message before school the next morning. She read it twice. Then she went to class. The classroom was the same as always. Noise, movement, the low-level social performance that seemed to be a major part of human school life. Dara was already in her seat at the back. She had arrived before most other students, which Riva had not noticed until now. Her notebook was open. She was writing. The lesson started. At some point, Cass dropped a question into the conversation the way people drop rocks into water, just to see what splashed. She said something aimed at Dara, something small and sharp about how some people in the room probably hadn't done the reading because they were too busy staring out windows that a few people laughed. Dara's pen kept moving. Then a few minutes later, Cass bumped the edge of Dara's desk with her elbow as she walked past a hand at her paper. The notebook slid. Several pages fanned out across the floor. People nearby looked. A couple of them smiled. Riva was out of her seat before she knew why. She crossed to the fallen pages and crouched down to gather them. She did not do it as a performance. She was not trying to look kind. She had simply moved. Yes, she picked up the pages. She looked at them. She could not help it. The equations were unlike anything she had studied. And Riva had studied mathematics from 15 civilizations. This was not a human system. It was not a Dominion system. It was not any of the 42 known notational languages in the Galactic Council's full index. The symbols moved in structures that bent in directions normal math did not go. And yet, somehow, Riva's eye followed them. Not with understanding, with recognition. The way you recognize music in a language you do not speak. She handed the pages back to Dara without a word. Dara took them without a word. That evening, Riva photographed the page she had seen most clearly and sent it to Yael. Yael received it at the end of her next shift. She ran it through every cipher, every linguistic database, every notational archive the council held. For 2 hours, nothing matched. Then she asked the archivist. The archivist was quiet for longer than it had ever been quiet before. Then it said, that notation was last recorded on a world that no longer exists. It was used by one being, a being the old records named the Anchor, the one who held the boundary of the universe in place before the event we call the Great Silence. We believe that being was gone. We have believed that for 11,000 years. Yael did not move for a while. Outside the station window, the stars looked exactly the same as they always had. But somehow they felt different now, like a room you have lived in your whole life, and then suddenly noticed has a door you never saw before. She sent one line back to Riva. She's real. Be careful. And be kind. The cafeteria at Millfield Secondary was large, loud, and shaped like someone had designed it specifically for sound to bounce off every surface at once. On a normal day, it was just noise. On the day Cass decided to make her move, it became something else that IT started with the bag. Dara had put her bag down near her usual spot at the far end of the last table. She had done this every day for 3 years. Nobody sat near her. Nobody bothered with her corner. It was an arrangement that worked without anyone agreeing to it out loud. Cash changed that arrangement. She walked past Dara's spot with Fun and 2 others trailing behind her like a small, cruel parade. She hooked her foot through the strap of Dara's bag and pulled. The bag fell. The contents spilled. A water bottle rolled. A pencil case skidded under the table. And the notebook, the one Riva had seen, the one full of impossible equations, flopped open on the cafeteria floor, pages bent. People looked. The cafeteria did not go quiet, but it shifted. That particular shift a room makes when it smells something interesting happening. Cass picked up the notebook. "Oh, look," she said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Dara has a journal. She flipped through it. Her face moved through confusion at the symbols and then settled back on amusement, because amusement was easier. This doesn't even make sense. What is this? Is this a language? Did you make up your own language, Dara? Is that what you do instead of talking to people? Fun laughed. Others followed because others often do. Dara stood up from her seat. She crossed the floor, picked up her water bottle, picked up her pencil case, and took the notebook from Cass's hand. Not roughly. She just took it back, the way you take back something that was always yours. She put everything in her bag. She zipped it closed. She did not say anything. Her face did not say anything either. She walked out of the cafeteria. Riva had been watching from 2 tables away. She had been watching since the bag fell. She had not moved quickly enough to stop it, and she felt something about that. Not guilt exactly, but something close to it. Something she did not have a Dominion word for. She followed Dara out. She found her on a bench behind the school building, the one near the old basketball court that nobody used anymore because the net was gone. Dara was sitting with her bag on her lap, and her face turned up toward the sky. The sky was gray. There was nothing particularly interesting in it. Riva sat down at the other end of the bench. They stayed like that for a while. It was Riva's least comfortable experience since arriving on Earth, and she had once eaten a school lunch that tasted like a warm sock. Eventually, Riva said, "Does it not make you angry?" Dara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Anger is just energy that hasn't decided where to go yet." Riva did not know what to do with that sentence. She turned it over in her head, and it kept landing on a different side every time. She asked, "Where does yours go?" Dara looked at her then, just briefly. "Somewhere useful," she said. She looked back at the sky. That evening, Dara went to the building. She always went in the evenings. It had been a storage facility once for some company that no longer existed. Nobody had bought it. Nobody had demolished it. It sat at the edge of the industrial district, unremarkable, easy to forget. The inside was not unremarkable. Dara moved through the space with the ease of someone who has arranged a room exactly the way they like it and has not let anyone change it. Along one wall were surfaces covered in equipment, not all of it made on Earth. Along another wall were screens showing feeds from places that were not in any news report. Star systems, structural maps of space, data that moved in real time, updating constantly, measuring things that humanity had not yet invented the instruments to measure. The center of the room was a table. On the table was a small object that was difficult to look at directly. Not because it was bright, because looking at it required your eyes to agree on a size for it, and they could not quite do that. It was a model of the universe, not a representation, not a diagram. The actual thing, held small through a method that had no name in any language Riva would have recognized. Dara put her bag down. She pulled up a chair. She sat at the table and put both hands flat on the surface and closed her eyes. She stayed like that for 11 minutes. Across the galaxy, without announcement or explanation, 3 stars that had been in the early stages of collapse stabilized. Their output corrected itself. The process reversed. Scientists on 9 worlds filed emergency reports about the unexplained recovery. Research teams were assembled. Funding was approved for studies that would find no answers. None of them looked in the direction of a small industrial town on a planet they considered barely worth monitoring. Dara opened her eyes. She picked up her notebook and turned to a fresh page. She began to write. Outside the building, the night settled in around it like it always had. Quiet, undisturbed. The grass grew a little greener near the walls than it did anywhere else on the street. Nobody had ever noticed that either. Back in the Dominion-arranged house, Riva pointed her bioreader at the wall in the rough direction of Dara's home. Old habit. She was not expecting a result. The scanner returned an error. A kind of error she had never seen in 6 years of using the device. The message was in Standard Galactic. It read, "Subject is not measurable. Frame of reference insufficient." Riva put the scanner down on the table very slowly. She sat in her chair for a long time after that, with the look of someone who has just realized that the thing they were studying has been watching them back the entire time. Counselor Bryn read Yoel's full report on a morning when he had 3 other things to worry about and no patience for a 4th. He read anyway. Halfway through, he stopped and read the beginning again. By the time he reached the end, the 3 other things no longer seemed important. He took the report to Director Soman before the day's first session had ended. Soman was not a being who showed alarm easily. She had managed stability crises across 11 sectors and had once negotiated a ceasefire between 2 species who communicated entirely through bioluminescence. She was practical in the way that sharpened things are practical. She read Bryn's summary twice, set it down, and called an emergency session of the Stability Division. Yoel was in that session. She had been reinstated to active duty specifically so she could present her findings. She laid everything out, the archivist's match, the null class classification, the notation system, the biosignature. She spoke clearly and without dramatics because she believed the facts were dramatic enough on their own. When she finished, Soman asked one question. "Can it be contained?" Yael said, "I don't think that is the right question." Soman said, "I didn't ask what the right question was." Yael argued. She argued that approaching the subject with containment intent was the worst possible strategy. She argued that if the old records were accurate, any attempt to restrict the subject would be unsuccessful at best and catastrophic at worst. She argued that the correct approach was careful, respectful contact. Soman thanked her and had her removed from the session. The decision made by the remaining members of the Stability Division was brief and practical. Send a field agent to assess, and, if necessary, act. The agent selected was known only as Drex. His species was not listed in Yael's clearance level. He arrived on Earth 2 days later, carrying credentials that identified him as a cultural researcher. He was very good at being invisible. He watched Dara for 4 days without her appearing to notice him. He watched her walk to school. He watched the way other students moved around her without looking at her. He watched her sit alone at lunch and write in that notebook. He watched her leave by herself each evening and walk toward the industrial district. That on the 5th evening, he waited at the end of the street that ran alongside the old building. When Dara came around the corner, he stepped in her path at a respectful distance and said good evening in perfectly accented local English. Dara stopped. She looked at him. He explained that he was from a peaceful research organization interested in her well-being. He said it in the smooth, rehearsed way of someone who has said similar things before in high-pressure situations. He said that she had come to the attention of certain parties who wanted to ensure she was safe and properly supported. Dara listened to all of this. She did not move. Drex activated the containment field. IT was the division's best technology. It had been used to stabilize collapsing stellar masses. It projected a field that disrupted energy output across all known frequency ranges. The field appeared as a faint shimmer in the air around Dara, like heat rising from summer pavement. The IT lasted approximately 2 seconds. Then it stopped. Not with a bang. Not with any visible force from Dara. It simply stopped working. The way a fire goes out when it no longer has what it needs. The equipment on Drex's wrist read a flat 0. Then it read an error. Then it turned off entirely. Dara stood in the street, completely unharmed. Her bag was still on her shoulder. Her notebook was still under her arm. She looked at Drex. He was a professional. He did not run. But every instinct he had that was older than his training told him he should. Dara said, very quietly, "Tell them I said no." Then she walked around him and continued down the street toward the building. She did not look back. Drex stood alone on the empty street. Around him, 2 streetlights that had been flickering for weeks burned steadily and clearly for the first time. He looked down at his equipment. All of it was dark. He sent one transmission back to Velprime. It contained no written report, just a 0.3-second video clip that IT showed the moment the containment field failed. It showed Dara's face in that moment. Her eyes on Velprime. Director Soman watched the clip. Then she watched it again. The room was quiet. None of the other members of the session spoke. Soman stood. She looked at the frozen image on the screen. This girl in worn-out clothes holding a notebook in the street of a small human town. And she said, to no one in particular, "What exactly did we just try to cage?" Nobody answered. Yael, who had been told the session was over and was waiting outside, was called back in. She did not say anything when she saw their faces. She sat down and folded her hands on the table and waited. Soman looked at her for a long moment and said, "What would you recommend?" Yael had been thinking about this since the first day she had opened that file. She said, "Apologize. Formally. Completely. And then ask, as one equal asks another, if she is willing to speak with us. Do not assume she will say yes. Do not assume anything." The room was very quiet. Outside the station windows, the stars looked the same as always. They always did. They gave nothing away. The formal apology from a galactic council was 4,200 words long. It had been reviewed by 6 departments, rewritten 11 times, and approved by a body that had not issued an apology to any being in recorded galactic history. The document used the phrase "profound regret" 4 times and the phrase "deeply inappropriate" twice. It was, by most bureaucratic standards, an extraordinary document. Dara read the 2-paragraph summary that Yael sent her and replied with one word, "Okay." Yael stared at the reply for a moment. Then she laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in 2 weeks. The council assembled an envoy. Yael was put in charge of it, which she took as both a vote of confidence and a sign that no one else wanted the responsibility. The envoy traveled to Earth via official channels, which meant paperwork with 12 different Earth government departments and a landing site large enough for a vessel that was larger than it needed to be. The council had insisted on the large vessel because they felt it projected appropriate gravity. Yael had thought that was a bad idea. She had been overruled. The ship landed outside Millfield on a Thursday morning. Every student in the school pressed against every window facing the landing field. Mr. Okafor gave up on the lesson entirely and let them look. Dara was in her seat at the back. She did not go to the window. She was reading. Riva stayed in her seat too, though not because she wasn't curious. She was watching Dara. She had been watching Dara differently for weeks now. Not with her scanner, with her eyes. The envoy's lead representative, a tall official named Pell from the Marith species, entered the school with a small delegation and was brought to the classroom. He was polished. He was practiced. He had handled first contact situations and delicate political negotiations across 4 sectors. He walked to the front of the room and delivered his prepared address that he spoke about recognition, about the Council's awareness of Dara's significance, about the great honor being extended in the form of an official invitation to visit Vel Prime, about the resources the Council was prepared to offer, about her future as a recognized and protected member of the galactic community. The class was completely silent throughout. Even Cass did not move. Pell finished. He looked at Dara with the expression of someone expecting a particular response. Gratitude, perhaps, or relief, or at least some kind of visible emotion. Dara looked at him. Then she said 6 words. "I didn't ask you for that." Pell opened his mouth and found it empty. His briefing notes covered 40 scenarios. They did not cover this one. Dara stood up. She walked past the desks and past Pell and past the delegation to the window. She stood there looking out at the landing field, at the large, unnecessary ship sitting in the grass, at the row of officials standing at attention beside it. The room waited. After a while, she spoke. Not loudly. She did not need to be loud. She spoke in the notation from her notebook, not in any spoken language, but the sounds of it, the rhythm of it, something underneath words that the air itself seemed to carry. Riva heard it and felt something in her chest shift, the way a room feels different when someone opens a window. Pell heard it and instinctively took one step back. The students who had been mocking Dara for 3 years heard it and went very still in a way they would not be able to explain later. The IT lasted about 30 seconds. When she stopped, the room was completely quiet. What happened across the galaxy in the following 4 minutes was not immediately known on Earth. It would take time for the reports to come in. But later, Yoel would compile the list, and it would read like something from the old archive files. 17 unstable systems returned to equilibrium without explanation. A species believed to be extinct for 200 years was found alive on a world that surveys had logged as dead. A black hole that had been consuming the outer edge of an inhabited system paused. Its event horizon contracted slightly, and then slowly began to reverse. Slowly, but undeniably. Pell received a rapid message on his communicator from Vel Prime. He read it. His expression changed in a way that was difficult to describe. He looked at Dara's back, still at the window, and for a moment he looked less like a senior diplomatic official and more like someone standing at the edge of something much larger than themselves. Dara turned around. She looked at the room, at Pell, at the delegation, at Riva, at Cass and Fawn, who were sitting very quietly and not meeting anyone's eyes. At Mr. Okafor, who had the look of a man who had completely lost the thread of what kind of day this was supposed to be. She looked at all of them for a long moment. Then she picked up her bag. "I'm going home," she said. Her voice was calm, not cold, just settled. "When the council is ready to speak to me the way one equal speaks to another, they know where I live." She walked to the door. She opened it. She left. Nobody stopped her. Nobody said anything at all for a while. Outside the classroom window, the large, unnecessary ship sat in the field. One of the officials standing beside it looked up at the sky without knowing why. Riva looked at the empty doorway where Dara had been. She had spent 6 years in the Dominion's top academic programs studying the known universe. She had memorized the complete index of galactic species, their histories, their capacities, their classifications. She had arrived on Earth convinced that she already knew the shape of everything worth knowing. She thought about that now. She thought about the bioreader in her bag and the error message it had given her. Frame of reference insufficient. She thought that was probably right. 3 weeks passed. The Council's formal apology, the full 4,200-word version, was delivered to Dara's home address by a junior official who had been instructed to hand it directly to her and not to make eye contact unless she initiated it. Dara answered the door in socks. She took the envelope. She thanked him. She closed the door. Later, she read the summary paragraph, set the rest on the kitchen table, and made herself a sandwich. She had a science test the following morning. She spent the evening preparing for it. On Vel Prime, Yael cleared her desk of everything that was not related to Earth and arranged a personal travel permit. She had not taken leave in 4 years. She took it now. She arrived in Dara's town on a gray afternoon with a small bag and no official credentials and no agenda. She had sent one message ahead. I would like to meet. No cameras. No counsel. Just me. You can say no. Dara had said yes. They met on the hillside at the edge of town. It was a wide, open stretch of grass that looked out over the industrial district and, beyond it, the lower part of town where rooftops collected the last of the afternoon light. Dara was already there when Yael arrived, sitting on the ground with her notebook open on her knee. Yael sat down nearby. She did not have a prepared speech. She was glad about that. After a while she asked, simply and honestly, "How long have you been awake?" Dara considered the question. Awake is a complicated word, she said. This version of me, this place, this school, this town, 3 years. And before. Dara looked out at the town below. Other things, she said. Other places. Other shapes. She was quiet for a moment. The records probably call them something grand. They usually do. The anchor, Yoel said. I have had many names, Dara said. She did not say it with pride. She said it the way someone mentions a long commute. It had simply been a fact of her life. Yoel asked, why this? Why here? A school, a town, a girl who gets her lunch knocked over. Dara's mouth shifted. Not quite a smile yet. Because nobody expected anything, she said. That was the whole point. When you're always what the universe needs you to be, after long enough, you forget what you actually are. She looked down at her notebook. I needed to remember. Did it work? Yoel asked. Now the smile came. Full, unhurried, and younger looking than anything else about her. Almost, she said. People kept being mean about it. Yoel laughed. Dara looked sideways at her, and the smile stayed. They sat together as the gray afternoon moved toward early evening. They talked, but not about the council or the stability division or the reports or the containment field or any of it. They talked about small things. Yoel mentioned she had never learned to cook well. Dara said she had once held a collapsing galaxy together for what equated to 300 years and still could not fold a fitted sheet neatly. Yoel laughed so hard she had to put her head down at AT school. Things had shifted. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But Riva had been talking in class, in her precise, careful, alien way, about the difference between what something appears to be and what it actually is worth. She had used no names. She had not pointed at anyone. But she had said, in the middle of a science lesson, that the most advanced scanning technology in the Sorith Dominion had once tried to measure a subject and returned the result. Frame of reference insufficient. That result, Riva had said, looking at no one in particular, was the most accurate reading the scanner ever produced. The class had been quiet in an unusual way after that. Cass, infants still sat at the front. They were quieter than they used to be. Not reformed, not transformed, just quieter, as if something in the room had gently and without fuss declined to keep being a place where that particular noise was comfortable on the last day before Yoel's return flight. She went to find Riva. They met at the edge of the school grounds. Riva said she had written a new report for the Dominion. Yoel asked what it said. Riva said, I told them that I made the worst scientific error of my career in the first 10 minutes of arriving. I told them that I looked at something I did not understand and decided it was unimportant. And I told them that if the Dominion wants to understand humans, actually understand them, they should start by assuming they are wrong about what they think they already know. Yael nodded. Good report, she said on Vel Prime. In the quiet hours of the station night, the archivist closed a file it had held open for 11,000 years. The file was large. It held records that spanned the age of the current universe and the edge of the one before it. Yael had asked, in her last official communication before leaving for Earth, what the file had been called in the old records. The archivist had responded, "We called it the quiet that holds everything together. We believed for 11,000 years that it was a theory, a metaphor, a name for something we could not explain." Yael had written back, "And now?" The archivist had replied, "Now we know it was a girl who caught the bus to school every morning and sat in the back row and looked out the window." On the hillside at the edge of town, after Yael had gone, Doris sat alone in the dark. The town lights came on below her one by one. She had her notebook open. She was writing equations by the light of her phone, not because anything needed fixing, not because the universe had sent her a problem to solve, but because she liked the way they looked. The way the symbols moved across the page in a language older than stars, doing nothing more important right now than being beautiful. Around her, the wind settled. Above her, in the particular patch of sky visible from that hillside, 3 stars that had not aligned in 11,000 years moved into a quiet, unremarkable line at AS if they recognized her, at AS if they had been waiting for her to sit still long enough to say hello. The universe's greatest power had a science test tomorrow. She hoped it would not be too easy.